Before we get started, just some warning that there might be a couple of images that are unpleasant. I apologize in advance. Unfortunately, this has become part and parcel of working with training datasets. And so we've seen plenty of these kind of headlines, how AI is going to leapfrog Africa into various opportunities. In Kenya, for example, how AI is going to provide economic growth and job creation. In Ethiopia, how AI can be harnessed to combat poverty, enhancing society, creating opportunities in South Africa. These are extremely common, not just across the African continent, but everywhere you look, you hear these kind of promises about AI. Within the UN itself, the UN recently has moved to adopt AI to accelerate SDGs. This is taken from the former Prime Minister of the UK, where he says, AI has incredible potential to transform our lives for the better. These are very common rhetorics, whether you are reading an academic paper in AI, whether you are reading around AI regulations. It's very common to hear to hear it being phrased as opportunities than risks. So we are all hyped around the kind of opportunities and transformations and potentials that AI is going to bring. But before we delve into whether this is likely true or whether it has no scientific groundings or not, let's spend a few minutes just deciphering what exactly AI is, because, as I said, there are so many claims, there are so many misconceptions, misunderstandings. At the very highest level, AI is a way of modeling a certain phenomena, a way of abstracting. With machine learning models, what we do is gather massive amounts of data, and when I say massive these days, it's billions and trillions of tokens of text, image, voice data, audio data, and so on. And from that data, through optimization processes, what we do is find patterns, find similarities, differences. We categorize, we classify, we make predictive models based on that massive amounts of data. To make it a little concrete, think of the most common use, for example, face recognition. If we want to build a machine that recognizes, that deciphers a face from not a face, we get the more data you have, the better. Thousands, millions of images of faces, you train your system to learn this is what a face looks like. And when you decide the AI is good enough, it's been trained enough, now we give it a task, then you give it an image that it hasn't seen before, then it should be able to tell you whether it's a face or not. So at the very highest level, this is the basics of AI. And as we are doing this, much of these technologies, they are not equipped to give us understanding. So the AI we trained on facial recognition system, for example, might tell us a face from not a face, but it's not able to tell us how it has arrived at that conclusion. These systems cannot aid understanding. What they do is make predictions based on historical data, based on past data, based on training data. They make predictions what the future looks like. And in that process, what we are doing is kind of extracting and abstracting similarities and features, whether it's from very simple behavior, whether it's from complex behavior. We simplify these patterns that can be datafied, that can be frozen in time and captured in data. And this has implications in kind of deciphering what AI can be good at and what AI is problematic. So when we are making AI models or AI classification systems or predictive systems within, say, biological systems, physical systems, and so on, we tend to be okay. The models we are building tend to be highly accurate, but also relatively free from ethical issues. So one of the most impressive and latest research, GraphCast, which is weather prediction based on various sensor data. So this kind of application is extremely helpful, extremely important, and it tends to be accurate. Another example is in soil health monitoring. Again, these are the kind of systems with plenty of data, with enough data, we are able to capture the phenomena that we are trying to model, and we are able to build accurate predictive models. Another excellent application is in board game simulation. We have, AlphaGo. DeepMind has cracked this years ago. They beat the best chess player, the best human chess player, and so on. Again, the rules of board games are that we can generalize, we can capture them in data sufficiently so that we can build these accurate models. Another extremely helpful use of AI that we should actually be doing more is in tracking and measuring carbon emission and energy consumption. Here is an example. However, as I said, as we are dealing with, agriculture, weather, and so on, we tend to produce good models with relatively less ethical concerns. However, as we move into the social space, this is, classifying, measuring, or predicting, human behavior, human action, and social systems in general. Because these are not behaviors, because these are not phenomena, no matter how large the data, they are not fully capturable, entirely capturable in data. The models we produce tend to be extremely inaccurate, but also full of ethical issues. Not just ethical issues, a lot of models that have been deployed have resulted in catastrophic results, and most of them have to be retracted. So I'll show you several examples. This was a few years ago where the Dutch government used algorithms to catch fraudsters that might be scamming the social welfare system. And upon audits, the system was found that it was disproportionately disadvantaging people that actually need benefits. Thousands of people were disfranchised. Some of the families, their children were taken away. Some of them even committed suicide and so on. And as a result, the system was taken back. Another one is the UK during COVID used an algorithm to decide A-level grades to assign grades for students. The system was again found that it was allocating grades based on area code rather than the merit of the student. Upon audits, it was removed. And in the US, another example is facial recognition systems. Due to errors, so far we know 6 people that have gone to jail, wrongfully arrested because of errors in facial recognition. And unfortunately, all those 6 people are of color of people, 5 black men and 1 black woman. And as you can see from the recurring themes, these systems go wrong. And when they go wrong, the people that disproportionately get negatively impacted are always people at the bottom of society, people at the very margins of society. This is the case whether we are looking at the application of AI in banking, in welfare allocation, in education, in law, in medicine, everywhere. Again, over the past years, there are several ample, robust empirical evidence showing that this is the case. So just to summarize, the more socially complex the phenomena is that we are trying to measure, capture, classify, and predict with AI models, the less capable AI is doing that, and the more error-prone, and the more it's likely to lead to disproportionate negative impact of people, because these systems are not just built in the lab and remain in the lab. These systems are increasingly incorporated into the real world. So how do we, I apologize, this is one of the images I don't want to focus too much on. So why is it so difficult to capture, the social space, human behavior, action, and so on? As I said, one of them is that because, human beings are ambiguous and messy, dynamic and interactive, even if we have the most accurate model with the best data, what we do is just capture a snapshot of a moving target. But we don't have that. That's just, an idea. We don't even have that. What we have is data that is, this is an audit that myself and a colleague carried out a few years back. Most of the training data that we have, never mind capturing this moving target, tends to encode and exacerbate societal stereotypes. Here, we did an audit of a dataset called 80 million tiny images. It was a large dataset that was used to train computer vision systems. As you can see here, we find several thousands of images labeled with, Black people's image labeled with the N word, women's image labeled with the W word, the B word, and so on. And here is the first 25 images labeled with the N word. Even much more recent datasets, this is audits of a dataset called a dataset used for training stable diffusion called Lion 400 billion. As you can see here, this is a snapshot of the portal itself, of the dataset. This is the first set of images when you prompt the dataset with African. As you can see, it gives you a representation of the continent in a very cliched, kind of tired stereotype. And when you compare it with the prompt European, it presents the continent, with just seemingly objective maps and flags and so on. So it's not just images in the dataset that encode and exacerbate these negative or cliched stereotypes. Texts themselves that are again used to train these systems tend to be problematic. This is a much recent audit that we did on a much larger dataset called the Lion 5 billion. This is 5 billion image and text tokens. As you can see, here is a sample of the text in terms of how it was rated, in terms of whether it's hateful, targeted, and aggressive. And then what we wanted to do was measure, as datasets get larger, one of the most recurring themes within machine learning is that scale beats noise. The larger the scale, whether it's data or model, then the problems kind of dissipate. You will end up with something close to the ground truth. So this is the hypothesis we were testing. So we compared two data sets, one containing 400 million image and text pairs, the other one 2 billion image and text pairs. And the idea was to see, as the scale of the data set increases, does the amount of hateful content, does it kind of dissipate and disappear? But as you can see here, that's not the case. As data set scale increases, so does hateful content, targeted content, and aggressive content. So the problems with datasets are foundational. They are the backbone of AI models. The higher quality your dataset, the better your model performs. And the problems with datasets necessarily translate to problems with models. So this is from a prompt from a model called DALI, an open AI model. The first one, as you can see, is generated with the prompt emotional author. As you can see, it gives you just a set of images with mostly women, all women actually, looking emotional and so on. When you compare that with intellectual author, the model gives you men looking relatively respectively. And this one is generated, I generated this using stable diffusion. It's African people at work versus European people at work. Again, the point here is that, certain representations of identities, cultures, concepts in data sets are reflected in how models produce outputs. And this one is from a report in NPR, where they were auditing the model called Midjourney. The idea here was they tried to get the model to generate an image of a black doctor treating white children, and this is the best the model could produce. Just partly. So let me quickly show you. Again, we've heard so much hype, especially recently with the popularization of generative systems. What we don't hear so much is, despite, against the hype, against the promises, how well do these models actually perform? So one of the most domain-specific areas where generative AI is supposed to excel is summarizing a book or a large amount of document. It's supposed to read it for you and give you a concise summarization. This paper that came out just a few months ago they tested exactly that. How good are these state-of-the-art, the latest models, when they are given massive piles of data in form of books? How good are they in summarization? As you can see here, these are, again, state-of-the-art models, including, GPT-4 Turbo, Mixtral, and so on. They really are not good at summarization when we carry out proper, thorough evaluation of how these models do. As highlighted in red, as you can see that they fail to produce factually accurate summarization. So over 50% of the book summaries were identified as containing factual errors or errors of omission. And another area is in material discovery. DeepMind, they do a lot of excellent research. I worked in DeepMind for a little bit, so I can speak from inside as well. However, they are also part of the hype that are really pushing a lot of unsupported empirically, a lot of hype that is not empirically supported. So last year, they released a paper that went viral immediately. It marked, the advance of AI and how we really are leapfrogging the entire science and human advancement and so on, where they claimed that using AI, they have discovered 2.2 million new structures in material discovery, in material chemistry, and it sounded too good to be true, so actual domain experts from UCL that work in material chemistry thoroughly and painstakingly examined those claims, and they found that, unfortunately, finding scant evidence for compounds that fulfill the trifecta of novelty, credibility, and utility. Basically, the original paper that went viral doesn't really stand up to scrutiny when experts scrutinize it. Unfortunately, the follow-up paper didn't really get much traction. The other area we are hearing so much about the use of generative systems is in code generation. It's supposed to really aid academics, industry experts, and so on in helping them generate code. This audit came out very recently where they compared, where they actually evaluated queries from Stack Overflow to study how robust and reliable the outputs are from generative systems. And as you can see here, misuse rate is the higher the misuse rate, it means it really is not doing well. The lower the compatibility, the compilability. Okay, just to quickly, I'm sorry, it's too much stats, too much data. So see GPT-4, for example, in the third row, 62.09. That is overall misuse. That is overall failure. And compilability, if you see the VNUCA 1.5, 37, it's compiling only 37% of the time, means the code it's generating is basically useless. It really is, there is some error somewhere that the code is not compiling. So the overall summary from here is that generative systems are not as great at code generation as they are made out to be. Another area where we are seeing thorough audits in examining these, a lot of these hyped claims is in the legal space. This paper again came out very recently, where they thoroughly evaluated generative AI systems that are used to aid legal professions. I highlighted this sentence because I read it, and this is something I would say. They go through a lot of the claims that people have made, how these models are going to revolutionize the legal space and so on, and they say that, but none of these bold proclamations have been accompanied by empirical evidence. And this is what they exactly did. They tested these 4 models that are used within the legal space, and as you can see here, most of them hallucinate, and they provide incomplete answers. Basically, they are these models that are domain-specific, that are specifically fine-tuned to aid legal experts, are just not that great. Another great area that we keep hearing again and again is the medical space, medical diagnosis, how AI is going to revolutionize medical diagnosis. And again, as you can see even from the title, this is another paper that came out very recently. These models are just as good as random guesses, as good as random chances. So they break down here the errors they make in identifying conditions, in diagnosing conditions, or in finding. They used various medical images from brain scans, abdominal scans, and so on. As you can see, they all fail, or they all have numerous issues. The last column is identifying positions of the organ within the body, and as you can see highlighted in bold, here the 2 models compared, GPT-4V and Gemini Pro, have issues with accuracy in giving wrong answer, rejecting accurate answer, in accepting hallucinatory answers when they were prompted, and so on. So just the last example, and we'll move on, because there are plenty of examples that actually show that a thorough scientific evaluation of these models that we don't hear so much about. This one came out in February, where they used these 5 state-of-the-art models to evaluate how accurate the answer is that these models are giving in relation to US electoral information. Again, as you can see here, this is the inaccuracy. Gemini, by far, gives the most inaccurate answer at 65%. And this is the models categorized in the form of inaccurate answer, harmful answer, incomplete answer, and biased answer. Almost all the models gave half of the answer all the models give is inaccurate. Actually, over half of the answer, 51% of the answer. So as well as the data set that these models are trained on and the evaluation of how accurate or how they stand up to scrutiny in assessing the overall benefit of AI, as well as focusing on the technology itself, it's also important to look at the kind of the overall wider ecology that AI technologies are built on, AI technologies rest on. This is the social infrastructure of AI. And even though AI started out back in the 1950s, 60s as endeavor that is supposed to replicate human cognition, that is supposed to give us thinking machines, over the decades, it has moved on to become a profit-maximizing industry. This is research that myself and colleague did a couple of years ago, where we looked at how big tech corporations dominate the AI publication space. So we analyzed 100 most influential papers in AI from two of the most prestigious venues, ICML and NeurIPS, and we compared data over 10 years' time. As you can see here, back in 2008 and 2009, only 11% of those most influential papers were either published by big tech authors or authors that have funding from big technology. But 10 years later, that number has jumped from 11% to 58%, showing that a lot of influential papers, these are not just papers, these are also papers that really shape the direction of AI itself, are either come from big technology or are funded by big tech corporations. It's not just the research space that's dominated by big corporations, as I said, driven by capitalism and profits. If you look at the wealthiest or the most revenue-generating corporations, compare it over 20 years. If you look at 2003, you will have a lot of much more diverse industries at the very top, at the top 10 list. But in 2023, all you can see is much of big tech, including Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, and so on. So they really are also taking up the financial space. And one of the most worrying developments is the regulatory capture of the policy space. As AI is becoming ubiquitous, and implemented everywhere, AI regulations and conversations around that are also taking place everywhere in Europe, Africa, Americas, and so on. But so is the amount of money that these corporations are spending in lobbying, mostly to derail regulation or to influence regulation in a way that aligns with the business models. And this is actually a bit old. This is data from 2022. As you can see, back in 2015, Apple, for example, didn't even make it as at the top 50 in terms of lobbying. But in 2022, Apple is the second big spender in lobbying around technology and regulation. So, as I said, we have to not just look at the technology itself, not just neural networks and their performance. We also have to look at the other environmental costs. So again, another one worrying development over the past few years is research investigating and measuring the energy consumptions that is needed to build, to sustain, and to maintain AI systems. And the energy consumption, especially with generative systems, these generative systems require a magnitude much higher energy compared to traditional AI. The energy consumption is really shooting up. Here is a report from Bloomberg where they are saying that AI is expected to suck up to 500% more energy over the next decade. And Goldman Sachs says that this is the kind of electricity growth that hasn't been ever seen in generations. And this is before we get into, the okay, so you see also there is so much deception as well. So things that pass as, AI drive-through often end up, data workers or gig workers in a trench coat. This was retracted. And going back to data centers. So in countries, Ireland, for example, the amount of energy that is needed for AI in generative systems is more than the total amount of energy required to run households. This is for small countries like Ireland. And this is before we even get to the huge amounts of gallons of water that is required to cool down data centers. This is another example of Amazon Walkout. I don't know if you are familiar with Amazon Walkout. The idea is that you can go to the store, pick up whatever you want, and just walk out, and the AI will magically identify what you have taken, and it will take credit from your account. But that AI supporting Amazon Walkout turned out to be over 1,000 people in India scanning the camera feed to ensure accurate checkouts. McDonald's recently partnered with IBM to use their AI to collect orders, and then they had to retract it because it was getting orders wrong. It was, for example, as you can see here, ice cream on top of bacon and so on. Again, this is very recent. And so coming towards, I know I'm talking too much. So a lot of people that are actually evaluating and auditing these systems from the beginning have been saying that much of what we hear about AI is unsupported by empirical evidence. However, over the past few months, we are seeing a turn because big names such as Goldman Sachs are doing their own evaluation and saying that, considering the amount, this is a Goldman Sachs analysis mostly based on the financial returns or the financial input that is required to build and run generative systems. This is the energy grids, the chips, and so on. And they are saying that given how much is the spend to build and sustain these systems, the financial return is just not that beneficial. But also in terms of assessing whether generative systems really help reduce workload or not, Forbes has done an assessment very recently where they interviewed over 2,500 global C-suite users, and they found that 70% of the employees using AI have said that it actually adds to their workload because the outputs are unreliable and hallucinatory, because they have to spend so much time fact-checking and making sure that the output is accurate and reliable. It's turning out to be unhelpful overall. In a way, confirming a lot of what we've been saying. And this is just a silly picture. I like to play with generative systems. So this is just to show you that these systems are nowhere near, understanding or conscious or anything like that. They really are machines that, identify patterns in massive amounts of data. And I thought this was funny that it just couldn't. Stable Diffusion didn't know what a catfish was. So rewind back to a lot of the headlines I showed you about Kenya, Ethiopia, South Africa, and so on. We all want AI to actually leapfrog our continent. We all want AI to do a lot of the magic things that we want. But the reality is it just doesn't, because it's not godlike. It's a machine. It's it's a neural network that can only work as well as the training data itself, as well as as good as the phenomena that we are trying to model. So this pushing AI into various domains, especially really important domains such as education and law enforcement and so on, because they have so much high risk on people at the margins of society, we have to push aside this wishful thinking, and we have to reckon with the actual state of the art, with the actual reality of the performance of the models themselves. And I've said so much about how not great AI is. I also want to end with the note that it is possible to actually build AI that can benefit people, that can benefit the most marginalized. But for the most part, it has to be separated from the capitalist drive, from the optimization has to be where the optimization have to be removed, away from, optimizing for efficiency, optimizing for cost cutting, and we have to optimize for values that are important and that protect the welfare of the most marginalized, or the welfare of that we are supposed to. Thank you, I'll just say. So it's possible to build these AIs, and people are doing that. We have, for example, in New Zealand, we have the Tahiku community that are building their own language technology using voice data, text data. In this particular Tahiku NLP project, for example, the overall goal, the objective, again, is not optimizing profit or optimizing efficiency. The overall objective is reviving their disappearing language due to, over the years of British colonization, they were discouraged or even punished to speak their language. So what they did was to teach the younger generation of that language. So they recorded the elders. They had hundreds of hours of voice recording to train this small model, speech recognition, with high accuracy. 86% accuracy is pretty good, and they control their own data. They have their own data sovereignty protocols. That means that they decide where the data is stored, who has access to the data, what people build with the data, and so on. So yes, it's possible. In Mali, I'm working with a group called Kabako Academics in Bamako. They are also doing similar things with their own communities using voice and text data from the group that's coming from the community. So I want to conclude that it's possible. We just have to be careful in kind of taken by the current hypes. And I'll stop there. I think I went over time. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so as promised, Abeba took us on a whistle-stop tour of everything messed up about all the things being promised to us right now. But we didn't hear very much about her journey, and I think most people, when they think about AI, they think about some nerd somewhere sitting in front of a computer. They don't think of someone who can expansively describe social systems with such elegance and political astuteness as Abeba. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to share a little bit about how you got into this, what your field of discipline is, sort of give us a little bit of background. How did you get into doing this work?
Yeah, my field of discipline is very multidisciplinary. I grew up in Ethiopia, and I did my first degree in physics in my hometown, Bahar Dar University. And then got a scholarship, went to Ireland, did another degree, and then got another scholarship, so did a master's in cognitive science. Then I feel like most of my life I've been studying. Then I got another scholarship and did a PhD. And so I'm a cognitive scientist by training. I started in the Cog-Sci department in the School of Computer Science in University College Dublin. But I was placed in a lab full of machine learning people, and I was much more interested in what they were doing than in modeling, intelligence or cognition or whatever. So I, halfway through my PhD, I was not so much interested in CogSci, and I was more interested in I saw data as really quintessential to models, but I also saw that data is paid the least attention. So I started working around auditing data and so on. And I think last year, I was in Time magazine as one of the influential people in AI, and according to AI, I'm pioneering a new field in data audits. So eventually, I left CogSci and I joined a software testing lab where, if you look at my thesis, the earlier chapters are around cognitive science, more particularly embodied cognitive science, but the latter are just evaluating models, evaluating, auditing datasets, and that's the line of research I'm also doing. I finished my PhD 2 years ago, and I am currently working on a big project, hopefully that will materialize soon.
Yeah. I feel like, based on the fact that you worked in cognitive science, there's a chance that at some point you've had to answer the question of, is artificial general intelligence ever going to happen, or is it a fantasy being sort of used to get us to work with these systems and engage because there's a future we may be finding soon that is of such great value that all of this nonsense about models not being good right now, we'll be looking back at this period saying, thank goodness we stuck with it because we now have some magical machine that tells us all kinds of things we didn't know before. I presume you don't think AGI is ever going to happen?
Well, nobody knows what AGI exactly is.
Yeah.
If there is one of the areas in AI that has the least consensus, it's the idea of AGI. Various people from various disciplines have different benchmarks for testing, different definitions, and most of the time not a precise definition. And we've had, maybe not exactly described as AGI, but we've had claims that we are going to build machines that are going to be conscious, that are going to think like man. That was the language back in the 1950s. We've had predictions like that, and we've heard predictions that we are going to have these machines in the next 10 years, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years, and we are in 2024 now, and none of these have materialized. And the entire AGI endeavor is super problematic, not from the technical point of view of can we build it, but also why do we want to build it? It's rooted in the definitions of intelligence that are rooted in, in eugenics, in race hierarchies, in that area where where intelligence is defined on a par with, pure cognitive abilities, or on a par to perform, or on a par that assumes that, the white man occupies the highest capability, and that is what we aspire. Also, by aspiring to build these massive models in the drive towards AGI, according to OpenAI, for example, large language models are, contain the sparks of AGI, or they are a way to bring us that way. We are, burning the planet, and we are building these massive models that don't really have a purpose, that are kind of floating around, trying to find a purpose, trying to be used, in education or medicine or whatever. Instead, when we could be building smaller models with specific intention that can actually do some good. So I guess what I wanted to say is the idea of AGI is problematic from so many perspectives. From the technical perspective that we just don't have a definition. We don't know what we are building. But from the conceptual definition that the idea of AGI adheres to eugenics and white supremacist definitions and understandings of intelligence, but also from the socio-technical perspective that we are building these models, hoping that they will exhibit AGI, but in the process doing so much damage.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go back to what you said about data being such an important part of these systems. And I know many others have said this, but I think Meredith Whittaker does an amazing job of sort of showing that monopolistic data infrastructure and surveillance infrastructure from companies has been necessary to sort of make these models and these breakthroughs that we have now. So do you want to talk a little bit, I know you've got some sort of pending research on the connection between some of these generative systems and surveillance?
Yeah, for sure. We have myself and my colleagues have done, the first empirical work connecting computer vision research with actually connecting research with application. If you ask anybody who works in computer vision, they kind of know that a lot of what they do end up being applied in surveillance, but it's a secret that nobody wants to, it's an open secret that people don't want to really acknowledge. So what we did was we analyzed over 40,000 documents of computer vision papers and patents, because computer vision research has the highest amount of patents that then are applied in the real world. And we examined where exactly does computer vision and research end up being used. And over 90% of computer vision, even though there is so much discussion about dual use, that technology can be for good or for bad, it's up to the person and so on. But what we found was that most of it ends up being in surveillance, whether it's body surveillance, surveillance. We classify surveillance in 3 different parts. Surveillance of the body, surveillance of irises, fingerprints, faces, ears, and so on. But also surveillance of the body. You have, gait recognition or various technologies that are used at borders and so on. Surveillance that is used for crowd counting in stadiums or big gatherings and so on, and surveillance of our social identities, social transactions, and so on. And there is a pipeline where, as everything becomes digitized, our financial transactions, everything we do, as that becomes digital, it's also a venue for massive data harvesting. We are leaving digital traces, and that data is constantly gathered either by AI companies directly, because data has become so important, and data is crucial, especially now for generative systems. And if anything is going to bring the AI bubble, it's lack of quality data. So now there is aggressive movement to really get hold of data. So this data in our daily transactions, whether we are ordering a food from a digital menu or whether we are paying for something with our credit card, is either, as I said, directly collected by AI companies or various data brokers and third parties, maybe people that provide, the backend for a website that we are interacting with. And that is then used to build AI models or various classification systems that then come back to impact us, whether we are looking for a loan, whether we are in the education space, whether we are looking at assessments into getting this school or that school, or whether we are looking at welfare benefits, as I said as I showed in the slides. All this data that's being gathered on us comes back around. It has a downstream impact. Even though it's aggregated, it does impact one way or another being used on us. As you might have gathered by now, I'm kind of a black sheep. I'm an outlier. So if I had grown up in a society where everything is categorized and decisions are aided by AI, I had no chance because I don't really fit the stereotype. And as we are making AI ubiquitous and inserting it everywhere, we are kind of eliminating, we are putting people in stereotypical categories, and we are taking agency away from people to kind of be the exception from this stereotypical category that we put them in. So it does have this surveillance aspect, even though computer vision research seems very kind of technical, very academic-y, directly or indirectly, it does have implications on all of us in the real world.
You mentioned Sunak and the UK Safety Summit and some of the discourse around sort of opportunity always paired with risk. But like the way risk is discussed is really variable. So the way you think about risk is, I think, a much better, healthier way of thinking about risk than maybe some of the sort of high-minded safety conversations that happen about if this AGI comes, is it going to kill us all? Like these kind of sci-fi type analysis of what types of things we should be looking out for. Do you want to say a little bit about sort of what you see in the safety discourse and what you wish we would see more of in terms of understanding and conceptualizing what we can do to sort of protect ourselves against the worst excesses of AI systems?
Yeah, for sure. As I mentioned earlier, myself and colleagues have been working on these issues for the past. I myself have been working on this 5-6 years, maybe even longer, and the AI space and AI ethics and AI safety is a space that is moving really, really fast. And a lot of, as AI systems rose to be ubiquitous, so does the discourse around, how do we make sure that they are not harmful, how do we make sure they are ethical, and so on. This kind of conversation also has been gaining attention. However, over the past few years, we see kind of a division, a bifurcation into what you call AI ethics and AI safety. So AI ethics tends to be, this is a kind of a caricature, not everybody fits in these two categories, but just for the sake of this conversation. So AI ethics is researchers, mostly people of color, coming from marginalized communities, with the definition of ethics as, bias in AI systems, discriminatory outcomes, and harmful outputs, and so on. So the focus is that the focus is justice, fairness, and so on. However, over the past few years, we also have this another group or community that has labeled the entire space as AI safety. They come from an entirely, different background, different understanding, that the focus is, what if AI becomes conscious, and is AI going to become conscious? If so, how do we control it? So the focus is then what they call capabilities, AI capabilities. So a lot of the discussion revolves around what compute power and what threshold, what compute threshold should be subject to scrutiny, should be regulated, so that we can prevent doomsday, so that we can prevent AI systems going rogue. So for this crowd, things such as injustice bias really don't feature in part of things that we should be safe from. And this has various motivations. The first one being that I did briefly mention the corporate capture of the regulatory space. So a lot of the harms that are emanating from these systems come from the models that big corporations are building and releasing. So this is a strategic move to divert attention away from the actual harms that they are responsible, that they are accountable for, that they have to mitigate. So by putting attention towards these model capabilities and these existential risks, then they can divert the conversation towards that way. And as I said, in terms of corporate capture, if you look at the AI Summit last year, over 75% of the people that were present in the UK AI Summit to discuss AI ethics, AI safety, and so on, either are, big company CEOs like Elon Musk and Sam Altman, or are scientists, or rather advocates, like, I don't want to name names, but these are people that are that are engaged or fascinated by these sci-fi-like hypothetical concerns that are very unlikely to happen, because, as I said, these systems really are, systems that are engineeringly amazing. They are, huge achievement in terms of engineering achievement. But when we are talking about things like, understanding social systems or, being conscious, these are, there are, again, ample evidence that shows that they are nowhere near that, and I personally doubt that they will ever be that. But if we give benefit of the doubt that that's likely to happen, that is a very far-fetched scenario where, by focusing on that situation now, we really are just ignoring issues that affect people, everyday people, concrete people. But because, as I said, these systems are deployed and intervene and impact people's lives. So it's politically, ideologically, and financially motivated, this move away from, mitigating, risks such as bias, injustice, and to move away to these hypothetical concerns that may or may not come true.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one more question, and then I'd love to take questions from the group. And that is sort of thinking about public sector decision-making as it relates to AI, because I think the government has a unique responsibility to make good choices and be good stewards of resources and be probably uniquely accountable to the people that they engage with in a way that maybe companies are less sort of bound to. Do you want to speak a little bit to sort of what posture you think public sector officials should take when they think about the possibilities of AI systems?
So, because I find myself over the past year more and more involved in the policy and regulation space, mainly because I was made part of the UN AI high-level AI advisory body. So I have been interacting a lot of government officials and people from the public sector space, as well as regulators themselves. And previously, I naively thought that proper regulation is not happening because people don't understand the technicalities of AI or so on. But over time, over the past years, what I have realized is that a lot of government officials and regulators, it's not lack of understanding, but rather they see AI as a financial benefit. They see these systems, by implementing these systems into various social spaces, whether it's education or law enforcement, they see it as opportunity to cut costs and to bring in more efficiency. They care very, again, I don't want to generalize, but issues such as that the fact that these systems don't work, or that they disproportionately harm and disadvantaged marginalized groups, are at the bottom of their agenda. So in the UK, for example, there are several examples where AI has been deployed into various social services with catastrophic disasters. So on the one hand, it's really unfortunate that a lot of these officials see AI and understand these kind of social services as something that can be automated. But as I showed, these are complex, dynamic social phenomena that can't be entirely captured in data and fully automated. So as a result, we see this push both from the tech builders, the vendors, and the government officials, almost aligned in thinking that AI is the solution because it provides great financial gain and it cuts costs and so on. As a result, people are further disfranchised and people are, again, as I said, people at the margins of society are further harmed with very little to kind of organize and to push back and to challenge these decisions.
Yeah, and just as a quick data point, I think it was in 2017, Palantir, 2018, Palantir made a deal with the NHS in the UK to essentially build its data infrastructure. Does anybody want to guess how much the contract was for? 1 billion, we have 1 billion here. How about £1? They signed a contract for £1. And you can tell quite quickly why they would be interested in partnering with a state to build its critical data infrastructure around a public health service. Because to them, essentially, once they get in there, you can't get them out. So this year, when they signed their next contract, do you have anybody want to guess how much that contract was for? £450 million. And Foxglove, a strategic litigation firm in the UK, sued, and under judicial review, it's now required for the next time that happens. So it didn't actually overturn this contract, but for the next time that happens, public consultation is required, because essentially there was no oversight, there was no accountability in these relationships forming between these giant companies that want all of this data for the purposes Abeba's describing, and are basically really ruthless in taking advantage of some of the sort of financial gain that these government officials are looking for. So I want to open it up to questions. We've got 12 minutes and 37, 36, 35. I see a hand.
Thank you. My name's Heather Son. Abeba, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for me. I want to say thank you for my kids. I want to say thank you for my kids' kids. I want to say thank you for the continent. Just thank you for the work that you are doing, because, I'll tell you why I feel so grateful, because I'm involved with conversations in various global locations during the year. And we had a conversation not so long ago in Abu Dhabi, and there were people from various parts of the world there. And in the conversation, we were going to talk about the region and share information about that. And somewhere in the conversation, it switched toward business. And very quickly, we were talking about Chinese demand and Middle Eastern capability resources. And suddenly, Africa, our continent, was being considered as a supplier of what everybody wanted, and a price taker, and not a seat at the table in terms of the future. I also was involved with another conversation where we were talking about US oil companies and how they still manage to book mega profits for their oil revenues on an annual basis, and someone was saying maybe we should price the externalities into the income statement. Maybe that will start to change behaviors. So I feel like we are at the precipice of creating the new world. This is what AI, it's more and more we're going to engage on these platforms. And I see the work that you're doing is starting to challenge that. We're almost creating a new language. And I'm quite inspired by a woman called Kathy Wood, who was a portfolio manager, and she called Tesla. And the reason I liked her is because she brought unlikely stakeholders around a table to assess the opportunity. So they weren't automobile analysts. They were automobile analysts. They were AI. They were futurists. They came at the problem from different angles. So what I'm wondering, when you mentioned values, I thought in the creation of this language, in the creation of this new platform, is there something that we can do to embed humanity into the DNA so that it multiplies almost irresistibly and without being able to be touched? That's number one. And secondly, I wanted to ask you, what do you dream about? So without thinking about the constraints, what do you dream about? What do you think might be possible if you could do anything? Thank you.
What questions?
So the first question, I think in terms of the values that we can embed, I think the Tahiko community and their NLP project is a really good example in building technology to benefit, the community it's supposed to benefit, based on the motto of, nothing about us without us, They gather the data, they annotated the data, they build their own models. They also have full control of the data. So this is a really good model to, local, small models that are built and conceptualized with intention. Because as I said, like a lot of the big models now we see really are not built with a purpose. They are even called general purpose models. They are just floating around looking for a purpose. So building these small intentional models to solve specific certain problems, that is the way that we can embed values of humanity into AI systems. The second question, if there is no constraint, I guess I would do what communities like the Hiku are doing at a massive scale. But at the moment, I'm also trying to create my own little group and start a lab that is going to do a lot of audit and evaluation work under the big banner of AI accountability. So I guess the smaller aspiration is, creating my own lab and running my own research and kind of expanding that. Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm really interested in this idea that we talked about it yesterday of digital public infrastructure, or public digital infrastructure. In my mind, AI should be public infrastructure.
Yes.
Either regulated like public infrastructure or actually owned in the public domain. And at the very least, some of the economic benefits for the use of the data should accrue back to people. Is there any movement towards that space, regulating AI like you would regulate electricity and roads and other utilities?
So this is at the heart of this misconception that people think AI is going to solve this problem, leapfrog the continent, and so on, because AI is often presented as a public good, as a public utility, but look at the companies, the AI companies that are building and deploying these systems. They have become so rich, they are at the top of all the scales we look. So the kind of the framing and the conception they provide to the public and the reality doesn't match up. So AI becomes a public good means that a lot of the capitalist motive that is driving model building has to be removed. It has to be driven by, as the previous question asker said, the kind of values such as justice, well-being, and welfare of the most marginalized, and so on. It has to be driven by those values. But the big corporations are never mind going that far. They are fighting with everything to derail any regulation. Maybe the best regulation so far we have is the EU AI Act because it's enforceable. And it doesn't go anywhere near kind of making AI a public, building some kind of infrastructure that makes AI a public utility. I guess the biggest bottleneck or the main elephant in the room is that we forget, we tend to decouple AI from capitalism when the very, fuel that is driving the power, capitalism is something that really powers AI development and deployment. So, the more we work towards decoupling that, the better we get at an AI, some kind of AI that resembles some kind of public good.
I would also say that infrastructure is usually a big investment you make because it's going to pay off over a long period of time and because it's a sustainable sort of investment that everybody can tap into. And because AI is not sustainable, because it's not actually effective, the idea of embedding it and then making huge state investment in it, at this stage at least, doesn't feel like a practical way to spend public resources, or at least in my view. But I would also say that the brain drain that Abeba has shown in her research from the academy into industry, I think is a really important area where we should be looking at how do we have the innovation that comes out that actually is valuable, that is held in some type of public space rather than within the corporate walls that are driving a lot of the misuse of some of the findings. So what would it look like for us to properly fund public universities so that you can pay academics like Abeba properly so that they're not all pulled into companies where that innovation then gets turned into some crap product that doesn't actually work. Other questions? Yeah.
My question's a really simple one. What do you say, Dr. Birhane, to people who say to you, it's a relatively new technology, so chill, because it's working itself out and it's not perfect yet, but it's developing, it'll take a few years, it'll get better.
No,
so
you
chill.
chill. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had that over the past many years. I mean, we've been ringing the alarm. What's the expression?
Sound the alarm.
Sounding the alarm. But now, the big names are saying the same thing that we've been saying. So now people can't say chill because all these, results, all these evaluations and all these reports are coming from authorities that people can't ignore anymore. So in a way, I think the past few months really mark the peak of hype where most people are realizing that, a lot of what they've been told is empty promises. So I guess let the evidence speak for itself. Because I'm criticized a lot over the years, I have developed this tendency that anything I say, I always support with empirical evidence. So I'll present the evidence to you, and then if you decide I should just chill, then, there's not much I can do, so.
I would also say the name of the session, like Gods Among Men, I think it's much more men that think they're gods, but they're really boys with toys. And I think there's, so I think they need to chill. They've got their tiny toys and they should, yeah. Back here, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Abeba, for a great presentation and to try to keep kind of the word safe. Yeah, but if we criticize too loud and too strong the models, we also risk that they're just gonna run then longer, and that is gonna fuel even more energy consumption. Yeah, so there is also the flip case, because that's what they are doing. So Elon Musk just building a massive one also to try to compete on that. So what do you think about that? And the second, some of the applications, when it's focused, for example, the AlphaFold, you probably are aware from DeepMind on the structure of proteins, that was a true breakthrough. It solved a problem that people are trying to solve for over 100 years in biology. So how to kind of be able to identify which ones work and have benefit, and in a way that sometimes if one criticizes too hard, we just make them even invest more on that.
Can I feel the AlphaFold one?
Yes.
Because we've been talking about this. So AlphaFold, it's an innovation from DeepMind that essentially unlocks with incredible accuracy how to predict how a protein will fold, which basically accelerated science dramatically. Like hundreds of years of science was done in a year. What I learned recently, though, is that it was DeepMind taking a contest that had happened annually of scientists that had been trying to crack this problem, and they had this competition every year. They get together, they say, who's got the best model, and they would get like a little better every year, and it was like a big deal for this field. So DeepMind then trained its models on all of that community science for 40 years, and then were able to turn it into something that could do something that no one had ever been able to do before by using compute, by using these new technologies. And I feel like it's a great example where, again, this science was supported by these technologies, and the purpose wasn't to make a ton of money, it was to crack a really interesting problem. And I feel like when you feel feel that energy around a problem like that, you can tell the difference between that and, a Gemini Pro where they're like, now my phone doesn't work because it's telling me all these stupid things. And I feel like that's why I started this saying we need a better bullshit detector, because I think if we can get the right signals around those types of problems, I think we're going to spend so much more good time on good problems rather than this sort of capitalistic drive to this garbage that we're seeing. So I think it's a really, really great point, and there have been amazing innovations, but they just get sort of crowded out by these other things that just don't make sense. So I think it's a really great thing to raise.
Yeah. So I couldn't have put it better. So thank you, Alex. The other question in terms of criticizing too hard. So for me, it's like comparing like criticizing too hard on the one hand and people's lives being derailed, people's job opportunities, being denied, people being denied from medical aid and so on. But also criticizing, I don't see it as criticizing too hard. I see it as, I'm a scientist first and foremost. I see it as I am doing a thorough evaluation of the claim that a certain, AI company has made about their model, and here is what I found. So for me, it's just showing reality, showing ground truths, rather than criticizing too hard. So if it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, then the claims are overblown, and it just doesn't work. And I mean, we have infrastructures for any other domain, from media to car manufacturing. Over years, we have developed standards. When we build bridges, we don't just let cars go without proper stress testing. We do the evaluation, the testing before we actually deploy it into the world. We are not doing that with AI, and for me, a lot of evaluation is doing that work rather than criticizing too hard.
Great. Okay. So I think let's wrap up. I just want to sort of end with, I know that a lot of you are in positions of governance, you're in positions where people are coming to you and saying, what's your AI strategy? And I feel like you being stewards of what's possible and sort of that future that we want to bring about, and just recognizing that there is innovation that is worth pursuing in this. This is not to say we should disregard these technologies, but it's that we should be focused on how do we make them work for 8 billion people rather than 8 billionaires. And I think that if you can focus on that, I feel like the people in this room, you can make a difference in terms of how these conversations happen. So thank you for all this engagement, and thank you to Dr. Abeba Birhane for an inspiring and amazing presentation.